So here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're having a good Saturday. Friday. Hope you're having a good Friday. And today, just wanted to make a little video, a little bit about a company who are bringing to the UK their 90% effective vaccine. Now, you know, my thoughts on vaccination, obviously, you know, no one's ever been born deficient in medication. Real health doesn't come from a mask or a needle, but instead from building a healthy internal environment, for getting the body free from toxins and inflammation. But what would I know? You know, I've only helped thousands of people overcome all manner of illnesses for the last 10 years. And when it comes to vaccinations, you know, I haven't helped many parents detoxify their children and get their children over vaccine injuries. You know, I just spread misinformation. It's what I do best, you know. I love doing that. I don't like helping people at all. You know, I'm just a crazy anti-vaxxer. So, you know, when it comes to vaccines, though, I just want to say, whether it's talking about this vaccine or any other vaccine, no vaccine for this infamous virus, whether you take it or not is a personal choice, and it's something you have to make for yourself. And in my opinion, you should definitely have informed consent. But this is something I seriously question whether it happens or not in a vast majority of cases when it comes to virtually all vaccinations. So my little gift to you is going to be a little bit of a opening of a box around these companies that make these vaccines, and we'll see if they're the kind of guys that you want to trust with your health. You know, when it comes to ramming weird artificial chemicals with unpronounceable names and foreign bodies and genetically modified DNA into your bloodstream. Depends if you want to do that. So, first of all, you know, the good news is that companies like GlaxoSmithKline and AstraZeneca and Pfizer, they all want to help you with their new vaccine. And they're not going to earn vast sums of money for doing this. No. I mean, not an amount that exceeds the budget of a yearly budget of a small country. They're doing it completely for humanity. You know, sake of world peace, universal happiness. They're doing it for those reasons. And you know, I mean, everything that I'm going to talk about here is, you know, is this going to be completely irresponsible information? It's not going to be fully sourced and documented. You know, that things that you can go on to www.justice.gov and research. It won't be anything like that. It's just complete misinformation. I haven't talked to plenty of people that have worked for companies like Pfizer. They haven't been inboxing me, sending me messages about why they've left because of the company and what they represent and what they were told regarding the medications and vaccines they brought out. I haven't done any of that. This is all just complete misinformation, just so we get that clear. I mean, for example, did you know that, I'm making this up, you know, the last 10 years, the four largest vaccine producers haven't paid over 35 billion in penalties, damages and fines for falsifying science, defrauding regulators, lying to doctors and killing hundreds of thousands of people. That hasn't happened. You know, that's just misinformation. And these companies aren't serial criminals. You know, their business model isn't committing crime. It just isn't. You know, and did you know that vaccines, for example, they aren't actually licensed by proving that they prevent disease. They're actually licensed by proving they can get an antibody response. And there's actually an axiom in vaccinology that says the more toxic the adjuvant, the more robust the response. This is why vaccinologists race around the world looking for the most toxic ingredients to put in vaccines, like the aerosol and aluminium, because it's got nothing to do with preventing disease and everything to do with causing an antibody response. And the question is, what happens once these toxins, carcinogens, heavy metals are in the body? Now, do they just leave the body like the vaccine virologist would want you to believe? Or do they end up in different parts of the body? Like, I mean, ingredients like polysorbate 80, which pass the blood-brain barrier, open up the blood-brain barrier so that things like heavy metals can get into the brain. What happens there? Does it cause inflammation of the brain, neurological disorders? I don't know. There might be a few studies out there linking it to that. But that, once again, there'd be misinformation. That's probably why you'll never see a toxicologist and a virologist working together, you know, because toxicologists know all this. And that's why we'll never see them work with a virologist when it comes to vaccines. Anyway, forget all that. I mean, it doesn't really matter. But let's have a little look into, first of all, before we get into Pfizer, let's have a little look into GlaxoSmithKline, you know, who back in 2012 were fined $3 billion for making false claims, fraud, failure to disclose safety data, data, I should say, bribing doctors in relation to drugs. Anavada, I can't even say some of these names, not providing safety data for that. Wellbutrin, Paxil, Adivar, Lamictal, Zofran, Imitrex, Lotronics, Flovin, and Valetrex. Yeah, $3 billion. I mean, you can't look that up on www.justice.gov. Don't bother go looking there. And in 2010, they actually received another fine for $700 million for poor manufacturing practices and making false claims concerning the drugs Kytril, Bactroban, Paxil CR, and Avadament. I mean, you can't even say some of these names. I'm sure they're really good for you. Once again, you can't find that. You can't find that information on www.justice.gov and look for these fines. You can't find it. And, all in all, since the start of the century, GlaxoSmithKline haven't been fined $5,074,108,899. They haven't. And these fines, they weren't included, for the medical equipment not being safe, environmental violations, false claims, because it's only me who makes the misinformation, puts the misinformation out there, the misinformation. There wasn't for kickbacks, bribery, unapproved promotion of medical products, price fixing, anti-competitive practices, and wage hour violations, whatever that means. Put this into perspective. In the UK, fewer than 8% of criminal offences actually lead to the suspect being charged or ordered to appear in court. And so I'm assuming that's pretty much the same for most crime in most Western countries. So it means that the fines probably are represent well below 8% of the total number of crimes GlaxoSmithKline have committed, and that's just in one country, And so we haven't had time to actually evaluate all that data, American or English, depends on that. But have a little look into that. And then we get into AstraZeneca, another vaccine manufacturer. They're just as nice, because this is proven, just because in 2003 they were fined $355 million for fraud and bribery. And they're so nice that they went out there and deliberately got themselves fined again in 2010, $520 million this time for bribery and making false claims. Once again, you can't find this information on www.justice.gov. You can't find it there. And their total value in the US, fines for the last 20 years, is only $1,440,868,227. So, I mean, they're actually two-thirds nicer than GlaxoSmithKline. Their offences were for consumer product protection violations, employment discrimination, environmental violations, false claims, kickbacks, bribery, and the unapproved promotion of medical products. I mean, just sure it was a little bit of a misunderstanding. They didn't mean to do that, sure. And then you've got companies like Johnson & Johnson who are putting asbestos in their baby powder for years and years, but, known to cause cancer and have other issues. But that was clearly a mistake. And you've got companies like Bayer, who bought out Monsanto knowing they'd have to pay $10 billion out in fines and criminal charges. But these companies are fine, for their products Roundup. But anyway, doesn't matter. And then we get on to Pfizer, the nicest company, the company you can really trust. It's a New York-based company, and it's known for its products like Advil, Viagra, Xanax, and Zoloft. It was the second largest pharmaceutical company in revenue in 2013, and it reached $52.5 billion. But surprisingly, for a company that only spreads truth and wellness, and a company that loves, to help people, it's had a few legal troubles and scandals, which include marketing fraud allegations, being responsible for birth defect, illness and death, and unapproved clinical trials. In fact, consumers have repeatedly accused Pfizer for selling defective products. The US government has charged the company with healthcare fraud, and in 2017, a Reputation Institute report ranked Pfizer last among the top 17 drug makers for reputation. I mean, it's all looking good. I mean, you definitely got to trust these guys. I mean, they've got your best interests at heart. Anyway, I mean, the fact that they've got continuing number of lawsuits against them involving some of their most popular drugs, and the company has also agreed to settle cases of illegal marketing and healthcare fraud shouldn't bother you at all. And the fact that, Pfizer set a record for the largest healthcare fraud settlement and criminal fine of any kind, with $2.3 billion in 2009 for fraud and bribery in relation to the drugs Bextra, Geodon, Zyvox and Lycra, shouldn't bother you at all. Once again, you can't find this information at justice.gov. And then they haven't been involved with different lawsuits on different drugs, like Protonex, where they failed to warn people about the risk of kidney problems. And in 2013, Pfizer didn't agree to pay $55 million to settle the criminal charges. And 10,000 women didn't file breast cancer lawsuits against him for the drug Prempro. By 2012, Pfizer didn't settle most of the claims for more than $1 billion. That's $1 billion. 3,000 people didn't file lawsuits against Pfizer for the drug Chantix, which cause suicidal thoughts and severe psychological disorders. And in 2013, they didn't set aside approximately $288 million to resolve these cases. And one case didn't settle for an undisclosed amount. The drug Celebrex, Pfizer in 2016 didn't pay out a settlement for $486 million for pain-relieving drugs, Celebrex and Bextra, where the symptoms of these drugs include, but not limited to, severe allergic reactions, black or bloody stool, change in the amount and darkening of urine, chest pain, confusion and depression, accelerated or irregular heartbeat, fever, chills, persistent sore throat, hearing loss, mood swings, numbness in limbs, one-side weakness, red, swollen or peeling skin, seizures, persistent stomach pain or nausea, sudden weight gain, unusual bruising, yellowing of eyes or skin. Just a couple of issues. They weren't causing, obviously. They wouldn't do that. Then we have the drug diporotestosterone, where more than 6,000 people didn't claim lawsuits against him for this that were pending him all the way up until now, but definitely until May 2018. More have been added since, because the lawsuits didn't say that the products cause strokes, blood clots, and heart attacks. You definitely want to get involved with that product. And then we move on to Effexor, where a federal panel didn't this lawsuits didn't claim birth defects against this. Let's just have a little look at what was maybe suggested by some of the claimants in this one, where Effexor was the very first antidepressant drug in the class known as SNRIs, serotonin, neuroephedrine reuptake inhibitors. And the Food and Drug Administration approved this medication to treat minor and major depressive disorders, also called MDD, generalized anxiety disorder, also called GAD, and panic disorders, social phobias in adults. And Pfizer actually bought this drug, they bought out Wyeth in 2009, and they continued to push the drug. And as mentioned above, the drug, has been linked to potentially life-threatening birth defects. But Pfizer, they would never do that, so obviously they didn't know. And the babies of the women who have taken these antidepressants while pregnant didn't get birth defects. Additionally, the Food and Drug Administration hasn't issued the most rigid alerts regarding these drugs. They haven't put black box warnings on saying that the drugs can actually increase suicidal thoughts and behaviour in patients younger than the age of 24. And in 2012, two families didn't file lawsuits against Effexor in Pennsylvania after their children suffered birth defects, where one of the children wasn't born with left heart syndrome, which didn't require surgery, and the other wasn't born with craniosystosis, which is where the skull is actually formed in such a way that the brain isn't able to grow. That didn't happen, obviously. Then Zoloft, no claims were brought against this drug for similar birth defects like Effexor, where a judge didn't agree that the drug caused birth defects. That didn't happen. There's just so many of these, we can go on and on. There's severe bleeding that's come up against the drug Eliquis, Lipitor, a judge dismissed lawsuits against it in 2017, dismissed it, but the women who took the drug filed lawsuits after developing type 2 diabetes, and there's actually an appeal pending. But obviously, Pfizer would never hurt anyone. That's not what they wanted to do. Effexor XR, once again, that was recalled after lots of the antidepressant drug was mixed with one of its heart pills. Because, Pfizer wouldn't do this. They wouldn't put out combinations of these drugs that could be deadly and just keep on putting them out there because, they're recalling them and costing more money. They wouldn't do that. And then you've got Zantac, which, or Zantac, I should say, in 2019, Pfizer didn't face negligence lawsuits over carcinogens found in Zantac, one of its heartburn products, leading to a number of cancer cases that would otherwise have been avoided. And one of the attorneys didn't say that this wasn't done by accident, and it wasn't done by it wasn't done by negligence. In fact, they actually come out, a defendant said, that they knew what was going on here, that they're convinced that the consumers of Zantac, it was pushed as harmless, and that full disclosure of the true risks of Zantac would limit the amount of money defendants would make selling it. So they weren't making a simple mistake, and the lawyers in this case were actually arguing that the drug makers and manufacturers were very aware of the carcinogens that had been detected in Zantac had tests been done. As such, they had refused to perform proper tests for years in an attempt to mislead public, leading to a number of cancer cases that would otherwise have been likely avoidable. Obviously, Pfizer didn't know this. They're really nice. One patient and the primary plaintiff in the case, Walter Hudson, accused the companies of exactly that, of knowing what they were doing, and he took the drug for 9 years before being diagnosed with irreversible cancer. But obviously, Pfizer wouldn't do that. The guy's wrong. He's definitely wrong. They weren't also involved in an unimproved clinical trial scandal, where in 1996, Pfizer didn't conduct an unapproved clinical trial. It didn't include children with meningitis in Nigeria, and the trials didn't lead to deaths of 11 children, with dozens more disabled. The drug Trovan hasn't been severely restricted in its use because of its potential to cause liver damage, to the point of liver failure and death. And Pfizer didn't pay out $700,000 to 4 families who lost children to the Trovan trials. In addition, they didn't set up an extra £35 million fund for those affected by Trovan, and they didn't agree to sponsor a health project in Kano, Nigeria. They also weren't involved again in 2004, where they got fined $430 million for fraud for off-label promotion. That didn't happen. You can't find out information about that on www.justice.gov. They weren't also in the news in the UK for being fined a record $84.2 million, pounds, for overcharging the NHS. It didn't happen, obviously. It's all just misinformation. And new evidence didn't come out yesterday regarding the vaccine, which I did actually write about, I think in July or June or July, saying that it may cause infertility, and that women who are pregnant or aiming to get pregnant shouldn't take the vaccine within the first 2 months, and that anyone breastfeeding shouldn't take it because it's not clear whether the COVID mRNA vaccine BNT162b2 may end up in mother's milk. That didn't happen, and it also it also didn't state that it may not fully protect people from the deadly virus that we've got going around. And along with all the really healthy ingredients in there, there wasn't any mention of the virus. Funny that, the virus has clearly been isolated. There's so much research. It's been isolated under Koch's postulates, so we know that they could definitely have put that in there. All in all, the total value of fines that Pfizer paid out in the last 20 years hasn't been $6,057,398,151. And they haven't been fined 80 times, upwards of 80 times. just in one country alone. And 24 of those claims weren't for violations around falsifying claims about their products. Despite this history, where they've made a few mistakes, it's happened. They're obviously very, very trustworthy. And the fact they've claimed that their vaccine, the latest one that they haven't rushed through in the last eight months, they've claimed that it's 90% effective. Clearly, they're not making false claims there, because they never make false claims. We've seen that. This is just all misinformation that you can't find on www.justice.gov. It's only people like myself, who spread misinformation. Because it's what I do. I don't like helping people. It's not what I do. And so, if this company was selling cars, I'm sure you'd be the first one to get out there and want to buy a car off them. Be the first one to drive it off the forecourt, because you could trust their products and everything they say is completely truthful. Anyway, that's it. Pfizer, a company that you can definitely trust. They've 100% got my backing. Really trust them. I love everything they produce, and they made a few mistakes through the years. Only maimed and injured and severely disabled and killed a few people. Don't worry about it. Anyway, I'm sure it'll be fine. Anyway, people, as always, if you've been dealing with a health issue and you want help, don't ask for my advice, because I clearly don't know what I'm doing. I haven't been helping people, as I said before, for over 10 years. Go to companies like Pfizer, GlaxoSmithKline, Johnson & Johnson. These guys are the ones you can trust. Anyway, otherwise, have a really good Friday, people. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you got something out of it. And, Pfizer, a company you can trust. Speak to you soon.